Welcome to another episode of Life on the X. Today, we're honored to be joined by retired Sacramento County Sheriff Sergeant Carlos Ponce. From humble beginnings, Carlos has dedicated his entire adult life to serving others. His journey began in the United States Marine Corps before he embarked on a distinguished career with the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office. Over the course of his law enforcement career, he served in a variety of assignments, eventually promoting to sergeant and earning a place on the sheriff's elite SWAT team, where he became a highly respected member of the unit. In today's conversation, we'll explore Carlos's journey from the Marine Corps to the Sheriff's Office, the experiences that shaped his career, and his important work today with the California Fusion Center, where he plays a key role in helping prevent terrorist activities through training, intelligence sharing, and interagency collaboration. If you enjoy this episode, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it makes a tremendous difference in helping us grow the podcast and continue bringing you the stories of the men and women who have dedicated their lives to service. As always, thank you for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and welcome to Life on the X. Carlos, how are you? Thank you, and welcome to this episode of Life on the X. I appreciate you being here.
Good to see you, Sal. Thanks for getting me. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Just happy to have you and happy to have this discussion with you and being able to share your background, your extensive background, both in the military, law enforcement, and things that you've done since leaving law enforcement that are still very closely related to public service. And so you're an interesting cat, man. You've done a lot of things for sure, and so I'm just glad to have you with us. Um, just to get started, Carlos, I'd like to see if I could get you to just discuss a little bit about your personal background, where you were raised, maybe as much as you would like to discuss about any family, and then we'll kind of move on from there.
Okay, Sal. Yeah. Born and raised in Sacramento, California, so Northern California. Come from a large family. Both my parents are from Mexico. Uh, five sisters, one brother, and just strong ties to Northern California.
Yeah, I think we talked about that earlier. You and I are both one of seven, and you know, the, there's there's never a lonely moment when you're in a pack like that. Um, um, but like you said, strong family ties, and I they probably there were times when we all hated each other, but we certainly enjoyed also being together as a family. Um, you say you grew up in Sacramento, and so you attended high school here in Sacramento as well.
Yes, yes. It's gone for now, but it used to be way back when Norte Del Rio High School.
Okay, and in high school, Carlos, or even in your early life, could you or did you imagine yourself ever being drawn to either the military or law enforcement? Or was this kind of a departure even for your family for someone to go in that direction?
It's a good question, Sal. To looking back, I did want to travel. I did want an adventure. I don't know where that came from. Maybe from um, just reading, but also too, same. Both my parents came from Mexico, but uh, I grew up working in the fields for a certain part. So as a migrant farm worker, and knowing that there was more out there in life, and so there's that hard work ethic that was instilled mostly by my mom, and but looking and traveling, and then also keeping up with school and just wanting more out of life. And then part of that is I remember these commercials growing up about the Marine Corps and being drawn to that.
Did you have any influences outside of, that which you saw on TV or commercials? I mean, did you know anyone who was in the Marine Corps or in law enforcement? Or again, was just some burning desire internally that drew you toward that?
So interesting enough, from the first grade to the third grade, so very young as a kid, you can't tell now, but I had a heavy accent because all we spoke was Spanish at home. So for first grade to the third grade, like once every 2 weeks, I'd break off with another set of students and we would meet in a different classroom with the English speech therapy worker, and that person was a former Marine straight out of Vietnam. And so obviously he didn't tell us war stories, but he gave us some of his background as because he wanted us to trust him, and getting to know him and his demeanor and the way he carried himself was a big imprint on me, as a small little kid way back when.
Great. That's a I mean, I'm not that exact story, but certainly it's like sometimes one person, one maybe even one interaction that can change the trajectory of your life, not at that moment, but certainly plant a seed to 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 kind of change your direction as you get older. And so, if he could only see you now, I'm sure he's probably no longer with us. Maybe he is, but he'd be very proud that he was an influence in your life. You attended high school in the Sacramento area, and then your first real adventure into public service was with the military. Tell me about that.
So going through high school and really getting my act together academically and playing sports, but I knew I wanted to get on with traveling in the Marine Corps. So I graduated midterm. I did 2 summer semesters at UC Davis, entry level college classes that transfer to high school credit, and then graduated midterm. And then 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, I was at Marine Corps Boot Camp, MCRD San Diego.
Good. Um, Tell me about that. And I always like to say this. I think because you and I are roughly the same age. Um, did you go in 77 or 78, 79?
Oh, no, no, I went later. I went in 82.
Okay. Well, I went into the Navy in 78. And as you recall, the Navy boot camp was right across the way from MCRD. And so, um, I'll tell you what, I used to just sweat watching, the Marine recruits working out across the way. And uh, I I had a lot of respect for for what was going on over there. My late brother, was a former Marine, and certainly learned a lot through his stories. And so, what was your impression and your experience during boot camp there at MCRD?
Well, going in, off a quick tangent, I wanted to be a grunt. I read, copies of Leatherneck magazine in our high school library. And so it's one thing to imagine it and, talking to the recruiter and saying, hey, there's going to be challenges and this and that. But until you live that experience, it's very different. So it was challenging. And even, you get there at 0 dark 30, maybe 2 in the morning, there's chaos, confusion. You're getting on the yellow footprint. There's a little bit in processing. Then, you're put into barracks. And I remember the morning thereafter waking up to trash cans and, being beaten, yelling. And for a second or two, like, where am I? Like I totally forgot where I was. And then, okay, I'm at Marine Corps boot camp. So it was definitely a culture shock, but I
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah, yeah. I enjoyed my boot camp experience as well, but I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much if I was across the way over at MCRD. Um, after boot camp, where were you assigned?
So, did my 3 months at boot camp. And then because I was a grunt, I was a, 0351. Now I think they're called combat engineers, but I was anti tank demolitions, went to infantry training school at Camp Pendleton. And then after that, went to Marine Barracks, Hawaii for 2 years. And so basically guard duty for 2 years, which was interesting. And the
Where was
island of
that, Carlos?
in Hawaii.
Okay. Well, if you gotta be a guard somewhere, that's not a bad place.
No, it was not a bad place. It was a great time. So, late '80s, being a young Marine in Hawaii, pretty good. A lot of good fun, some good memories, a good group of Marines to work with, uh, and good training for the time I was there with Marine Barracks.
Yeah. Um, and how long were you there?
Approximately maybe a year and a half, 2 years, trying to think back to it, and then I was, reassigned to the fleet.
To the fleet, and where to from there then? Where did when you say to the fleet?
Just across the island to Kaneohe and, India Company 3 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines, assigned to a weapons platoon, for anti-tank and demolitions.
Excellent. How long were you in the Marine Corps?
5 years active and then 2 years active reserve.
Any deployments at all during that time? I don't think there was much going on during that period of time, 82, that
That
would have.
that that's correct. So, but I did catch a float called Westpac, 84. So countries like Kenya, Thailand, the Philippines, a stop off in Hong Kong, um, and so, being able to train with the, uh, Korean, Marines and then, training with some, Thai Marines. So good training, training with the Kenyan forces, during our time there, and then back home.
So you were assigned to a ship, an amphibious ship, or when you say afloat?
Yeah, we were, and if I remember correctly, it was the USS New Orleans.
And what was that? What was the New Orleans?
Man, that's a good
Was it a
question,
flat
Sal.
top?
But
Did it
what was that?
was it a flat top, or was it what type of ship was that?
I think it was an LST, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So
And
probably a
that's
uh,
Go ahead.
no, yeah, an LST, probably a flat top, and that was home for 6 months, during that time of the float.
Very good. Um, Interesting experience while you were abroad?
Yeah, there's, culturally being exposed to different cultures, time, got to go on a safari, but also too seeing how different forces trained or interacting with different forces and seeing their tactics or sharing tactics, and building a sense of at least camaraderie while we were there, uh, exchanging ideas and tactics.
And you got out, of the Marine Corps actively 5 years later, um, and what was your next step in your journey?
So I spent some time there with Any Company 3 3, and during that time, if let me go back when I was with Marine Barracks. I expressed an interest to my platoon sergeant and then to the platoon leader, a young lieutenant at the time, that, hey, I eventually would like to get into recon. And so I was afforded the opportunity while I was still at Marine Barracks to go to assault school, a small unit leadership course, which was 2 months at that time at Kaneohe. And that was like because I had already been to one later on, like a good training for like small unit tactics, land navigation, um, fire team formation, and things of that nature. Some CQB stuff during that course. So, and then I got to go to air assault rappel masters, and this is all as a Marine assigned to Marine Barracks. And then again, just time and chance afforded the opportunity to go to at Schofield Barracks a Ranger indoctrination program. And so that kind of set the tone of, okay, I like that training. I like those challenges. I like that team camaraderie. Leave Marine Barracks, Indy Company 3 3, and then uh, asked to go to Alpha Company 3rd Recon. There's a selection process, passed that, and then got assigned to 2nd Platoon, 1st Team, and then received more training out of that and more opportunities for training and some good challenges at training.
Well, it sounds like you were, picking up a lot of, good information and good training along the way, which certainly kinda sets the stage for a number of things that would be going on later on for you in life. Um, Once you separated from the Marine Corps, what what did you do?
So by that time, I had several schools under my belt. So I had amphibious recon school, which was at Coronado back then. I'd already been in Navy scuba school, been to jump school, and had these other, training opportunities under my belt. And so I stayed active reserve because I wanted to keep jumping. And at that time period, you know, uh, January of '87, put in I took leave off for recruiter's duty and put in for the sheriff's department, right? No internet back then. So everything done by hand, walking all the paperwork through. I get out, I'm in active reserve. So once a month, I'm up at Deptford Force instead, just a small suburb out of Reno, doing that training. And then like January of '88, get a call from the sheriff's department saying, "Hey, we like you're hired. We're going to pay you to go through this academy." And very interesting. I think we mentioned this before, just time and chance again. I get out, I'm still doing my active time with the Marine Corps, doing jumps, even got to do a water jump at the Lake Tahoe. And then, like mid November, I get a letter from the Marine Corps saying, "Hey, your experience as a civilian may not be what you thought it'd be. We're going to offer you a $10,000 resigning bonus. And, there's a spot in First Force Recon, which was either had been startup or had already been reestablished. And out of Camp Pendleton, there's still a selection process. And so we give you that opportunity." So I got that letter, and it came close because I had until February 17th to keep any rank status that I had as a sergeant to go back in. And so I decided to go with the sheriff's department. That letter
And
came just in time.
which department was that, Carlos?
The Sacramento County Sheriff's Department.
Okay. So it got you back home and um, to where you wanted to go into law enforcement. Had you investigated any other agencies at all? Was like you were interested in working back in Sacramento for the sheriff's office?
So, yes, I also applied with the Sacramento Police Department, and they're a great organization as well. And I remember I got the phone call first from the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and just for me, that was my first pick. And then I did subsequently get a call from Sacramento Police Department, and respectfully turned it down and said, "Hey, I've already been offered a job with the Sheriff's Department. Thank you for the offer."
Yeah. What'd you think of and how long? Well, how long was the, the the sheriff's office or the sheriff's department academy?
So 6 months, and it had its own challenges, but it was just different. It was paramilitary, but by that time I had some world experiences. I've been to schools where, there was a high, you had to have high performance, and, people would fail. Um, Somebody died at Army jump school. Uh, and so I seen some real world events. And so for me, I thought, okay, as long as right, you're not going to take my air away from me underwater, you're not going to run me to death. Um, I should be okay. And then what I didn't mention as well, my first 2 years when I didn't have to deploy, I did 2 years at Chaminade College as an English major because I wanted to brush up on my writing ability, my grammar, my lexicon, because I knew there was a lot of report writing in law enforcement. And so I was prepared for that environment. And so it was actually fun for me.
Good. I mean, I think anyone who's gone into the military, whether no matter what branch of the military you've gone into, and then enters into civilian life and into a paramilitary environment and a training academy like the sheriff's office, and in my case, the California Highway Patrol. Um, it just tends to be a little easier because you understand first off what the concept is and what the objectives are of that organization to almost break you down to some degree to build you back up to align you with their principles and how they do business. And so I'm sure it was quite easy for you. Um, After you completed that 6 month period in with the sheriff's office academy, where was your first assignment?
Well, just so I can go back, I wouldn't use the word easy. There's still challenges, because you would push yourself, right? Either the run or academically. So I wouldn't say easy, because
Easier.
they're just not as stressful to me as it was to other people. And I'd leave that at that. But so I do the sheriff's academy, and my first assignment, because I'm old, was actually at the old Sacramento County Main Jail before the new one was built. So I worked there for 6 months, did my JTO, and at that point, already the new main jail had been built, and there was a transition from prisoners from the old main jail to the new main jail back then. And so I worked at jail for approximately 2.5 years, which was also an interesting time in getting to know people, not just within the organization, but speaking to inmates.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who don't understand the differentiation between a sheriff's department and a police department or anyone else is that routinely is not always the case, but when a person graduates from a sheriff's academy, they most often are are assigned to a stint period of time working in the jail, um, because the sheriff runs the jail and for the county. And so, you've got to staff that people, and sometimes they run it with custodial staff, with the very few deputies. But in some instances, it's predominantly run by deputy sheriffs, and I think that sounds like that's the case in Sacramento. And so, knowing that that was going to be the case for you, it sounds like you got the best of it because you just mentioned, you get to understand, you know, some of the people that are in jail, and it's a great way of learning how to speak the language, how to understand their mindset, etc. Did you gather that during that time?
And I did, and I'll say part of that came from having a great as a recruit way back when, having a great set of cadre instructors at the Sheriff's Basic Academy, during for the different LDs or learning domains, and then with a mindset that I either, like most people, or you get these stories in the academy about people being detectives, and I knew I wanted to work gangs because I like that. I enjoyed knowing more about that sort of subculture. So gangs, narcotics, and then eventually SWAT in my mind. And so when I got there, and again, just I grew up in North Sac and the Del Paso Heights area. So this is something I hadn't mentioned. My first day at the old main jail, I'm working the fourth floor, and in each of the cells that we were housing people, because that's what we didn't have pods or separate rooms. I knew people from high school, like enough to have like a mini high school reunion, and not demonizing them. It's just time and chance taking a different path. And so I found that interesting. And so moving forward at the new main jail, working the pod, walking around inmates, I would start talking to people, about, and I'd say, okay, outside of Miranda, and I don't want to know specifics, but like, how did you sell dope? How did you move product? How did you try to hide it from the police? And some of them, rightly so, would say, hey, you know, go bend yourself. And others would say, hey, officer, or some, hey, Deputy Ponce, I'll share this with you. Why are you so interested? I said, well, 'cause I want to know how the game's being played. And so got a lot of tradecraft information on that, which came into, uh, relevant and salient information later on as a gang detective and an art detective.
That's pretty smart. Like I said, if you want to learn to think like that element, then probably the best way to do it is to work in an environment where they're housed, and you, even in almost in an osmotic way, you're starting to pick up things about them, their characteristics, their mannerisms, etc. It makes you a better street cop once you get out there. Certainly makes you more observant of a lot of things once you expose yourself to that. You were in the jail for a couple of years, and you mentioned a couple of different assignments. What was your next assignment once you left the jail?
So from the jail, I went to North Patrol, did my FTO, and then I spent 5 years in patrol. And my first few years were on graveyard and got into a lot of stuff. And,
What kind of stuff, Carlos? What kind of stuff?
oh, pursuits, crimes in progress, uh, finding guns and dope out of cars, and then transitioned to swing shift for the remainder of the 3 years. But back then, and it's getting back to that with the new laws and sentencing guidelines. But back then, if you made a felony arrest for anything of a person driving a car under case law, and I could be wrong. I think it's New York versus Belton, 1991. You get search the car incident to arrest, regardless of the charge. Right now, it's different under Arizona versus Gant. And so I got into a lot of guns and a lot of dope, um, and I started doing my own expertise for possession and possession for sales, and that really opened up a door for a lot of opportunities. I don't want to say name recognition. I don't know if that's the right term, but resource multiplier for the DA's office, because I would be at the courthouse and I do my own expertise for possession and possession for sales. And usually you'd get a NARC to do that, but I could do my own. And I'd get DAs walking down the hallway. Hey, do I have any NARC experts here? So I'd raise up my hand and introduce myself. And I'd say, hey, read this case real quick. What do you think? I go, that's a good case for possession or for possession for sales. Um, and that by that point too, I had finished up my associate's degree at Sacramento City College, associates of science in criminal justice. And so, read books, took classes on gang culture, drug culture. And so that allowed me to, testify on the prelim for some of these cases. And so became a resource multiplier for the sheriff's office, because now I was establishing a working relationship with different DAs from the NARC office.
Are you a drug recognition expert, a DRE?
I was trained as a DRE, but I will say I never called into court specifically as a DRE, but called into court to talk about objective signs and symptoms.
Okay, but not anything associated with a case that you had done a DRE on.
That's correct.
Okay. Um, well, it sounds like again, you're finding new and exciting ways to expand your career. What came next, Carlos? After I mean, were you a part of a drug task force?
Yes, and I'll say this too. Even just going back, uh, my first JTO at the Old Maid Jail later became the undersheriff, but he was a sergeant, the Fifth Special Forces Group. But even going back to that, we were doing academy PT, and he was there on the academy teaching something, and we were doing PE. And like most uh uh rookie, or new boot Marines, I go to scuba school and I get a shark tattoo on my calf, and he walks over to me and says, "Hey, Recon," and I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I can tell by your shark tattoo." And so you know, talk to him, and eventually we worked together in patrol. Eventually he goes to SWAT. So I'd see him in passing, and he'd say, "Hey, SWAT something you want to do, pursue that." And so again, I'll say this, networking, um, and just time and chance, and being provided the opportunity. Uh, I got to go to FBI SWAT school when I was still in patrol, and be part of an auxiliary team for our SWAT team at the time. And then, but even though that didn't work out initially, from there, after 5 years of patrol, I got or put in and obtain a position in our gang suppression team. So I was with our gang unit for 6 months, and so even then, went to a uh, assisted with like gang homicides and things of that nature. But so this was uh 95, 96. So rock cocaine was really coming into Sacramento, and I started within the gang unit buying a lot of rock cocaine, just street sales, right? And no by bus, just to get search warrants into different houses within for the gang unit. And then word of mouth, um, I got a call from the sergeant of a federal task force at the time under SPD, called the CRIP team, Cramp Rock Impact Project. So 5 years patrol, move forward, 6 months on the our gang suppression team, get into a lot of good cases regarding you know crimes committed by gangsters, building up that expertise, and then started buying a lot of rock cocaine, and then recruited onto my this federal task force.
Who are the players at that time in the gang in the Sacramento area during that period of time?
Well, I won't
Prevalent
mention
gang.
names or but, organizations. You had 29th Street Crips, you had Oak Park Bloods. I mean, really heavily involved. Another, team or another group, was, Lane Drive Homies back then, involved in heavy distribution of methamphetamine, but also distribution or, buying guns off an illicit market to arm themselves. So really, hard impact on the quality of life for the people living in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, generally that's what they deal in, guns and drugs, right?
Yes.
Not a lot in the way of extortion, or organized crime in other ways, but they deal in something that's almost consistent in guns and drugs.
Yes, and I'll say this too, even, when I first got into the gang unit, helping with investigations, because you mentioned extortion, where you had certain segments of, like Vietnamese and Hmong gangsters, extorting their own people within their own neighborhoods, and, minimal, and I'll say minimal on my part, minimal assistance on that regarding the development of those cases and trying to, prevent that from happening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm sure you touched on some main gangs, but there's a lot of gang activity in the Sacramento area, Northern California as a whole, and the Asian gangs are very prevalent. And what about any European gangs or European organized crime?
I won't speak to that right now. Just my exposure to that isn't, as robust as it was to the different gangs. So I really couldn't speak to. I know they're there. At one point we had, and I won't say, organized crime, but we had Russian, car thefts going on, and we'll say illicit trade of car thefts, and then reselling that because working with, different entities or a connection with like FBI, getting briefs from the FBI, hey, these car thefts are going on here, and then they're finding these cars over in Europe.
Yeah, and I imagine there's a string of chop shops in and around the Sacramento area that uh, where a lot of these vehicles were dismantled and parts were being sold all over the place, and they just it's a big it's a really big issue in the Sacramento area and throughout the entire San Joaquin Valley, but certainly something that's prevalent in Sacramento. You mentioned Crip. Were you ever involved in any activities with say JTTF or any other federally organized groups?
Well, at that point, no joint terrorism task force work, but with the CRIP team, there were, cases I participated as a case agent or as an undercover officer that met the, federal mandatory minimum for federal prosecution. And so we had one, DA assigned to us from the district attorney's office specifically for our cases, and then back then to the supervising DA at that point was also cross designated, as a AUSA prosecutor, so assistant U.S. attorney prosecutor. So we could seamlessly move our cases, into a federal prosecution if we were going to pursue, like that avenue of approach. Um, but we worked with DEA, so I got to do undercover work and case agent responsibilities with DEA a lot, FBI. And so a lot of opportunities there for, these cases to push forward, learn, and then just the challenges of working big cases. So big cases, big problems.
Seems like kind of a silly notion to talk about it right now, but certainly in that era, marijuana was a big deal. Were you ever involved or somehow associated with camp?
Our team was not. So the CRIP team was not. And part of that was the way that the grant was written, that we would focus our attention on crack. So anybody, uh, with raw cocaine or powder cocaine, uh, and then so methamphetamine distribution, methamphetamine sales, and so we would concentrate on any gangs doing that, not just uh, you know people think, historically maybe, because of norms, raw cocaine being in the black neighborhood, but it was everywhere. even in the Hispanic neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, but then also, you know, crank at that point, right? Methamphetamine, with the heavy involvement of Mexican nationals and cartels, either bringing it over from, through the San Diego border. And back then, I mean, we would come up, we would do labs. So we'd have large clandestine labs throughout Sacramento County or surrounding counties where you'd go and you'd walk into a barn, a good sized barn, and it'd be a whole lab setup for people making, we'll say, you know, sometimes 4 to 10 pounds a week, because they were going at it hard and heavy, and that being distributed throughout the area or finding itself on the I-5 pipeline going up to Oregon and Washington.
I imagine, I mean, and certainly, like, there's just a lot of collateral, um, things that spring out from, just this notion of narcotics, including, the asset forfeiture programs that go on, because you mentioned, you know, distribution, and when there's distribution, there's sales, and when there's sales, there's assets. And, sometimes the best way to stop them is to take away, everything that they've got. And not just in terms of monetary, um, um, funds, but also like physical assets. And so, were you ever involved in any large asset forfeiture cases?
I mean, I was, and I won't mention them, but it wasn't uncommon where we would go to a location where the business or residents and a high end dealer for that area having, it wasn't uncommon. I remember some houses and they had over $1 million, you know, in a bureau. And gold and silver, high end vehicles, and you had asset forfeiture team there, taking account of things and then, using, booking that into evidence and later, using those funds for prosecution or using that as evidence for prosecution. And then those funds being diverted for task force use.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, take the money, take the house, take the cars, take everything, and take them down to absolutely nothing, so that they have no ability to continue their activities. And then use those funds to try to bolster the eradication through the teams that you guys were involved in, et cetera. Certainly, because in some ways, it's taxpayer funded and otherwise, and so you might as well try to use the money to in some way to make it proactive. Um, Once you got out of the gangs, Carlos, what was your next assignment?
So, we talked about my time in the gang team and then CRIP, and then I got recruited. So when I was on CRIP team, I was TDY, physically assigned to this federal task force away from the sheriff's department. Um, and then got recruited back to the department through major narcotics. So I did that for about a little over a year, and then tried out for the SWAT team, and made it. But I'll say
What
this
year was
too.
that? What year was that
So
you made it on the team?
2000,
2000.
right?
And so, man, that's quarter century ago. Um,
Yes,
and so, not trying to age you, but I'm just saying that
I,
you know,
I'm old.
the same marker goes on me. But so much has evolved in both SWAT training and a number of different areas. Um, SAC SO full time team.
Yes, and
Okay.
I just want to go back to, when I went to amphibious recon school at Coronado. I know it's different now. I think it's everything's done at Camp Pendleton, uh, but there was a peer evaluation where you can get peered out for not being a team player, or because you were assigned to a team at the time at Coronado for training and for 3 phases of patrol and small boat teamwork and things of that nature. And so when I say that, I tried out for the team, I tried out for the team by then by multiple times and, not selected and having to have the maturity enough being told, hey, yeah, you perform well, but right now we don't think you're a good fit for the right team. And so, team dynamics really come into play at that point. So at this point too, when I've been on the gang team, CRIP, and then majors, even on CRIP and majors, if it was a really high risk entry, we would coordinate with SWAT. And so I was getting more exposure to the SWAT team, and this would be like a different generation from the time that I went back to the basic SWAT in '95. Uh, so 5 years had passed since I took the first basic SWAT school, and then multiple attempts to get on the team, not successful, and then successful in 2000, and yes, a full time team.
And let me talk about that for a second. You took you a couple attempts to get on the team, and that's probably not unusual. I mean, probably some people make it on the first go around, but it's not unusual. I'm in my career have been fortunate enough to be assigned to some very specialized units, and certainly one of the things that I kind of recall throughout the selection process of those units I was involved in, not unlike a SWAT team, probably very much not. I mean, like even more so maybe with a team, is that you have to be a team player and you have to be a part of a team in such a way that they can not only depend on you, but they can trust your actions, both professionally and as a team member and the skill level and the skill set that you bring to the team. Um, can you speak to what you believe it takes in order to get to that level, and why the selection process can be sometimes very difficult.
So you talk about being a team player, but also to a critical thinker, and then maybe bringing some experience to the table as far as tactical planning, planning for cases, planning for a high risk entry, or having I'll say knowledge and maturity where going back when I was on the crypt team or majors back in house with the sheriff's department saying, okay, we have this entry. This person has a very violent history. They have violence of guns. We're going to have to delegate the responsibility for entry to the SWAT team. And then, right. So, when having that knowledge, but having that maturity and saying, hey, requesting that help. And so, wherewithal the a wider aperture of like tactical awareness, case planning, and then contingency planning. And, I guess having a good knowledge of those things, but also too, we all get a jacket or a reputation of like of who we are. Um, and so I had that, but also too, we've talked about this before, Sal. I tend to be an introvert, but I thrive in small team environments. And so all those things are needed. But then also being able to work with different people, right? Not just culturally, like for different ethnicities or nationalities, which is good, but just different people on a team because you'll have your different personalities on the team.
Absolutely. Again, it's not about those factors of ethnicity and nationality. It's about who you are, the type of person you are, and as you mentioned, having those essential critical thinking skills and physical aptitude, um, and just being a guy or a woman who can work with people in a way that is probably not so common, even outside of that team. In other words, you work for the sheriff's department in Sacramento County, and you are a team player, but you're part of a bigger team. And as the team gets squeezes down, whether it be that gang team or anything else that you're involved in, the selection process and what it takes to be part of that team becomes a much more, I don't want to say difficult, more selective, and so it takes a lot, which only says and speaks to your character and the skill set that you bring, that you would be chosen for the things that you'd been chosen for up to that point. Um, let's talk a little bit about the activities that you were involved in while you were on the team. Did you have what was your assignment, or did you have some special assignment within the team?
So then you come on as I'll say general operator, and that's what I remained mostly. But I was, I'd still maintained my training for as a rappel master because I was still doing rock climbing and my own rope work. So I got assigned as the rappel master and tactical rope guy for the team. Eventually secured a spot as the firearms instructor for the team for the MP5, the M4, the shotgun, the handgun, that. And so those responsibilities, but then also too with our full time team, every 2 weeks we're at the range. So when it was your turn, you were responsible for developing a training program or a training regimen for that day, that, and then, you would be assigned different places within the stack, or, it'd be your turn to go get the peacekeeper, for an operation. And so, the way the call out would happen, you'd get a call or a text, and then the evolution of the text machine. Hey, we're having a call out. Here's a command post. Go get the peacekeeper. Or, hey, we're having a call out. Here's a command post. Start moving there.
A lot of people don't realize that although, on occasion, something may come up very, urgently in an emergent way that requires immediate deployment of a tactical team, but, um, a number of your ops are well planned with an ops plan and all the boxes checked to ensure not only great tactical response, but a window and an envelope of safety that ensures success in that operation. Um, would you agree to that, or is there something that's missing that goes along with that?
I would agree with that with the majority of our high risk entries that we did, or just general entries for other teams throughout our region, or even coordinated uh, tactical plans where it'd be a large narcotic operation and there'd be 4 or 5 teams within the briefing. And hey, we're going to coordinate. We're all going to hit these houses at approximately 0700. And these are all high risk entries, right? And so you had the tactical plan, you had fire on standby. You had the NARC team on standby that would, take over the residence after we cleared it, secured everybody, and then turn that residence over to the NARC team.
Yeah, that that full time team is a luxury that is not seen often by many agencies. I think you would agree, and and you also mentioned, regional work, and so, like, there are a lot of it's probably even more so in the time in the era in which you were working, a lot of smaller agencies that did not have a tactical team, and so did you guys do a lot of allied agency assist?
We did some, but some of the surrounding agencies, or counties would have like a regional SWAT team from different agencies part time, and so they would handle some of their own work. But we would come in sometimes if what were a multiple uh, location hit for execution of a search warrant, or even at times where if there was a prolonged critical incident where, and I remember this on certain operations where SAC PD handles it first. They're there for 12 hours, and then we come in and we take over for the next 12 hours, and then SAC PD resumes their watch, and they would do that for us as well.
Did your team get involved in any hostage rescue situations at all, Carlos?
Uh, yes, during the time I was there were 2 hostage rescue situations.
Can you share some of the details of at least one of them, and we can talk about that?
Yes, I'll share one, and it's probably my 3rd year on the team, uh, within the county of Sacramento. Called out for a call for service. It turned into an armed barricaded subject with a hostage. We get there to the command post, and in a critical incident, unless there's shots fired or something demands everything starts to slow down because intelligence gets involved and things start happening where before we take this next step, not unless there's an exigency, hey, we've got to get some planning done. So get there, relieve patrol officers from the inner perimeter, and then start to develop a plan to actually uh, do a breach of the residence opposite where the hostage is being held at. Um, and I being part of that, and then in one instance where being part of the initial breach team, and not just a breach, but not not letting the suspect know, so quiet. Uh, and then remember setting up a like a ballistic blanket, right? So low tech back then, ballistic blanket. Our specialized electronics op team comes in, and I remember watching them right drill by hand holes on the bottom, along the bottom area of the floor to put pin cameras in, right? And so then going eyes on electronically, and then being removed, and another set of team comes in to relieve you, being removed from that, and then that it got on for a period of time, and not having a successful negotiation, so it's prolonged, and for statistically speaking, the longer the situation goes on, the better outcome, but not having the desired results in dialogue, but between the crisis negotiator and the suspect. So one suspect, one hostage, and I remember being part of the element. We get you know uh, shown a different house, like 3 or 4 houses down, same house layout, majority of the team's there, and we go through, the perimeter of the house, the exterior of the house. We know what room the suspect and the hostage are in, so this is gonna be, uh, a hostage rescue, known location, so the team is put out there, going through all that, and then, the contingencies plan did so I was going to be part of the exterior breach team if the interior breach team, has less than desirable results. So going through that initial aspect, learning and seeing, hey, this is what the interior breach team is going to do. If that is less than desirable, that doesn't work out. The exterior breach team that I was part of, this is what you're going to do.
So let me make sure
And
I understand what you're saying here, because that's really pretty interesting and actually pretty smart. Your team said, "Hey, we're in an area of homes or apartments or condos that are basically tract homes, all
yes,
very similar. And so the floor plans were all the same. We have this opportunity to go a couple houses over, allow the residents to allow us to kind of survey and assess that house to have an understanding of what a breach would look like based on our knowledge of this house. Is that correct?"
yes.
Amazing. I mean, who that's genius level, really. But because you might otherwise say, "Gee, I wonder what the floor plans are." Someone said, "Hey, well, it looks like that house. Why don't we just go over there and see what their house looks like, and then kind of figure it out from there?" We've already got pinhole cameras, in the space, so we know where they're at. Um, that's pretty smart. How'd it work out, Carlos? How'd that whole thing shake out?
Uh, so we practiced did our, and when I say practice, it was like 15 minutes of practice. Okay. And at that point, it had gone for a period of time. A decision was made by the command post that we were going to effect a hostage rescue. There's going to be a breach, a forcible breach, and then, we'll see what we have there. So we go back to the house, we get in position, we, the interior team moves to their breach point, we move to our exterior breach point. The operation, is a go. Things are put into place, and time and chance. The interior breach team was very successful. Goes in, force was used. The suspect was dispatched. The hostage was rescued, and we had a successful outcome, even though force had to be used.
Wow. And again, if I think the biggest asset to that whole op was the fact that you guys had the wherewithal to kind of get an idea of what the layout of that house looked like based on a neighbor and their understanding, and allowing your team to go in and just kind of take a quick look at the house and get an assessment of what it would look like to breach and where your suspect and the hostage would be. That's pretty cool. Anything else that you might have been involved in that that you might want to share?
I mean, there's other operations. We're talking about training, and you come across just training, and finger off the trigger discipline, where you walk into a room and there's somebody they're contemplating reaching for a gun, and you give them commands and you successfully negotiate. Things like that, or encountering people hiding, either armed or unarmed, and uh, thinking, time and chance. Didn't have to use force, and it worked out in a good way.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned about this, and it sounded like, the suspect in that particular, hostage rescue was neutralized. No injuries to the hostage, no injuries to the team.
Correct. No injuries to the hostage, no injuries to the team. So, and
Contingencies for injuries at all? I mean, and this is where kinda y kind of the nature of what we're talking about just in this show. It's not just, you know, the experiences that occur on the X, but the inclusion of, you know, care for people, whether it be self-care, buddy care, victim care. In that period of time in the early 2000s, um, what what was the level of tactical medicine, if even the term was even being kicked around at that point, and how prepared were team members or even law enforcement in general, from your perspective?
again, right? So we're talking about the dynamics and of training, and what was the norm at that time. Just to go to that critical incident, by that point we had like a TIMS program, and we had a doctor assigned to the team who on critical incidents, not everything, but obviously on this was, in the peacekeeper standing by. So when that incident was, resolved as far as hostage being rescued and the suspect, being shot, as soon as it was safe enough, the doctor was brought in, under force protection, and pronounced the suspect dead at the scene. So we had that going, but just very interesting, Sal. Even it, it was talked about, but non-existent, and it isn't to villainize the sheriff's department or even the Marine Corps. It just wasn't top of mind. We talked about this where when I was on our CRIP team or even major narcotics, and we'd do training on entries, and we'd have a word like avalanche, which means we're going to collapse as a team and extract, or we'd have an officer down. I remember, hey, we're grabbing the officer, we're dragging them outside, and then we're calling for fire. But there it never was, hey, okay, we dragged him outside, we're off the X, we're going to, protect ourselves. Somebody's going to stay up on gun. All right, somebody's do a primary assessment. Hey, where's this person bleeding at? That was never discussed because it just wasn't, you know. And even on the SWAT team for the first 2 years, I mean, we had like a tourniquet, and I don't remember everything, but everything was mostly tactics, shooting, physical fitness, and these are all salient features of it. But everybody had their first aid kit on their cover six back then in the same place, so we knew where to reach it. Everybody had the radio in the same place. So, for comms, if somebody's comp went down and we had to go to somebody else's radio. So we had some things that were in place for SOP. Just medicine wasn't a big deal. Um, it just wasn't
I
top
like
of
to say it's never important until it's important, and it's a phrase that you've used in other contexts as well. And so, but the evolution was slow, and I mean, in 1996, the founder of the International School of Tactical Medicine, Lawrence Heiskell, um, started this concept of tactical medicine, and it took probably close to 20 plus years before it became a much more accepted and universally practiced concept of providing care, for people, and then trying to incorporate it into a tactical environment like that, which a SWAT team would be utilizing it in, became even more intricate because you and I both know, you can't start working on people until you neutralize the threat, until you reach this level of safetyness that allows you to work on people to exfil out of there, to to address the most major injuries, and then get out of there, off the X, to whether it be a waiting ambulance or maybe even possibly one of your vehicles that now becomes more of a, you know, uh, medicine on the move concept that is still now also being utilized. Um, do you see today that um, the importance of officers being more prepared in the provision of tactical medicine?
Is there a need for it? Is that what you're asking, Sal?
Well, I mean, what are your thoughts? And certainly that there's a need. Do you see that there is a need that is either unmet at this point, or is the evolution of it starting to get greater traction?
Well, I think the evolution is starting to get greater traction, and not because it you know, we could say it's important, but there's a, you know, a real world need for it based upon the level of violence that individuals engage against law enforcement or engage against the general public, where, you know, you're on scene, you neutralize the threat, and then you have this casualty there that's got an arterial bleed or you know, uh, a penetrating gunshot wound to the thoracic area. Right, it's ill advised now. Hey, we're gonna wait for fire to get there, right? We're officer safety is always paramount. Um, Suspects dealt with. We need to treat this person here. So I think from the point of self preservation for us as you know, for law enforcement today, but also for the optics of looking from the outside in, and you know, these you have these officers standing around and somebody's injured. eh, Um, some type of first aid needs to start, some type of intervention. Again, officer safety is always paramount. So I think the level of violence against law enforcement, the level of violence within society, that law enforcement encounters or that perpetrators commit against others, right, necessitates that need as a salient or very important aspect within the training that officers receive today.
What do you think about that same concept at the civilian level?
So, um, you know, working or in some of my travels and doing uh, active shooter presentations, just seminar based, I talk about like nothing's a big deal until it's a big deal. And then the other aspect I talk about training is like we, including myself, we don't rise up to that level of training we've attended. We rise up to that level of training we engaged in. My point of saying that, and churches, not all of them have gone, you know, above, stepping beyond of like getting, you know, more robust first aid kits. Because most of the first aid kits I've seen in some of these churches in what's in the Northern California area, band-aids, some gauze, but no tourniquets, no type of pressure dressing, nothing with the hemostatic agent. So I think there's a big gap because, you know, it's a house of worship, whether it's a mosque, a temple, a gurdwara, um, and even in law enforcement can happen where we fall into a false sense of security or complacency.
Yeah. Well, if you work in an urban area, you will tend to default to um, probably a very robust and what would seem to be a well organized EMS system that has pretty decent first response. But I think you and I both know, certainly in my experiences, is that that isn't a sufficient amount of time, especially if we're talking about the more critical um, types of injuries that can exacerbate in minutes and lead to a death of someone. External exsanguination being probably the big one. And so I think it's certainly very important for our law enforcement personnel to be well acquainted with this type of medical care. But let's take it a step further, Carlos. You spent a number of years on a tactical team. In today's environment, where you use the term active shooter, but any targeted violent um, event where the deployment of a tactical team might take upwards of 30 plus minutes. Well, just say 30 at a minimum if they're all floating around out there. Um, how important do you see it for patrol level officers to up their game in tactical response?
Columbine really started this off where came from a surrounding call out now to active shooter response of going to the threat. Um, and as a student, about 2 years ago, complete some active shooter training with this company, and the concept there was like one's enough. If I've got indicators, then I've got to go and deal with that threat. And obviously, we're not saying trade a life for life, and you think, well, nobody wants to get shot, but if my threat is, actively stroking the trigger on innocence, chances are I'm not worried about my six. And so you have to train that concept in for success. And so that one aspect's important. And it's not just even somebody with a gun, but somebody with an edge weapon, somebody with a blunt weapon, a baseball bat, a metal pipe, doing something where there's this engagement of you know loss of life, and we've got to stop the killing, you've got to stop the dying. So you have that one aspect of really conducting training, and again, we've talked about this before, where that takes time and money, paying for overtime, and some agencies may not see the value of that because, well, nothing's ever happened here. Um, but nothing's a big deal, so it's a big deal, and sometimes people think, oh, that it always happens over there, or it happens, not going to happen here. We don't have that type of dynamic environment as far as perpetrators or targets, and I disagree with that. Vigilance is good, hypervigilance you burn out. Just like you had that active shooter up in Chico this past week.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's an
there,
important component.
but that goes to what you just got done saying. It won't happen here. It happened at a library in Chico, but by a young man who just this month graduated from high school, who, um, if at a minimum, based on his statements, was inspired to do so by the events of Columbine and wanted to
Yes,
commit a Columbine style attack. And so, yes, and again, I don't want to be a fear monger either. And I don't, I think within the law enforcement community, we tend to be hyper vigilant, but that's the nature of the beast in which we are. We go into restaurants and we sit ourselves in different specific locations. We want to be, at the back end. We want to be able to see the door. We're looking at people as they come through, etc. That's a level of hypervigilance that I'm willing to accept based on just the fact that this is the lifestyle that I chose. Should people all around us feel the same way? No, but they certainly should have a level of understanding of what the environment is today.
you're right. And law enforcement, part of the training I've done or continue to do, we talk about behavior and teaching people, and something might seem innocuous to one person or harmless, and to somebody else, like, hey, that is a behavior we should pay attention to, or that behavior is a pre-incident indicator of some type of harmful or criminal intent, if not now, sometime in the future.
Yeah. Which is kind of a smooth transition for me to discuss with you um, what your what you have done since leaving law enforcement. Um, and can you tell us a little bit about what you've done since you've left active law enforcement?
Right. So, and I'll say this: so even though retired from the sheriff's department, I still work for the sheriff's department. So any views I share are my own views or views from my academic background. And so to say that, I finished my undergraduate, got my master's of science, and then part of that concentration was on extremism and terrorism, and then being assigned to a fusion center within Northern California and teaching people both in the law enforcement and sometimes military and then the private sector, uh, looking at behavioral. I'll use the word profile if you don't like the word profile indicators of harmful intent or right then and there, or future intent for planning, and SAR, the suspicious activity reporting under the nationwide SAR initiative, and then, working through the threat liaison officer program, instructing that, and then being part of the infrastructure liaison officer program.
And I think that's all great, and we're definitely going to touch on some of this stuff. Let's take a step back here. Can you explain to our listeners what a fusion center is, and is there just one fusion center here in California, or is there just one fusion center in the United States? What are fusion centers?
So I'll say there are about 80 fusion centers located throughout the America. We have 5 fusion centers here within the state of California. I'm assigned to a fusion center here in Northern California, and then there's different ones for different AORs within California, and that they're part of like what we call the STAS, State Threat Assessment System. And so, a fusion center is an organization of multiple entities with different specializations to look at trends, provide an analysis, receive information, develop that into intelligence if necessary, and then provide that intelligence to the correct people for any type of interdiction or investigation if applicable.
My understanding that these fusion centers were um, developed post 9/11 so that at the federal level we could better have a better understanding of what possible threats would be occurring throughout America, and not just one federal agency trying to figure it out across the United States, but have partners in that effort to try to prevent and respond to threats. Is that how you see it as well?
Yeah, so the fusion centers act as like a conduit of information. We receive information, and then look at that, and it may be nothing or it may be something, and then that there's a relationship with our federal partners, like JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force, and there could be and other entities involved as well. And it's just to provide a wider or a robust, wider aperture of the landscape around us, right? Not everything that's done is a threat, but there are things that happen out there that uh, could lead to threats for in the future.
And how's that tie in with SARS then, Carlos? Tell me about SARS more specifically.
And so it's our suspicious activity report. And so, I say this, right? Being part of that system, I believe in it because somebody's going to look at it. So if somebody submits a SAR, analysis is going to look at it. And, through the nationwide SAR initiative, there's, suspicious criminal activity and non suspicious criminal activity. And because we live in America and we have our Bill of Rights and the freedoms that we do enjoy. There are a lot of things that happen out in the open that are suspicious non-criminal activities that occur sometimes without reporting, right? Whether somebody trespassing at critical infrastructure, somebody driving by a college, a school, a place of worship, and they're driving by real slow and they're filming it with their iPhone, and somebody at that location calls the police, and law enforcement get there, right? And speaking from experience, I get there, I talk to the complainant, they give me a description, I drive around the area, I can't find that person, and because there's others calls pending for service in my CAD, computer aided dispatch, I'm going to put UTL unable to locate or GOA total complaint to call back. But if that's all I do, it's going to stay in the CAD. And maybe I'll do an AM, an administrative message to my beat partners and, hey, look out for this car. Let's see if we can identify this person. This is what they were doing. But let me go back, not against the law to do what they were doing, right? Photography, for the most part, unless different uh, scenario elements are provided, it's protected under the First Amendment. So suspicious non-criminal activity. I'm driving by, I've got my phone out, I'm driving real slow, I'm videotaping the school, videotaping kids, or I'm driving by some infrastructure that has security cameras. I stop, take pictures of that. Um, if that's all that's done, law enforcement is called, and they can't resolve it, chances are nothing's going to get done and they've got to move on to the next call for service because that's the nature of the beast. But if somebody does a SAW or suspicious activity report, an analyst is going to look at and vet that for an investigative follow up. And so there's going to be things that are going to be looked at as far as behavior, the description of the vehicle, the description of the individual, and if that person can be identified, what are they up to?
And just imagine, Carlos, if prior to 2001, we had a robust SARS program, a nationwide SARS initiative in place, and someone at an airport, at a place where they're teaching people how to fly, decided to put in a SAR saying, I don't know if this means anything, but we have a guy here who is taking flight lessons. It just seems kind of weird, made the hair stand on my neck a little bit, suspicious that he only wants to learn how to take off, not how to land. Can you see? I mean, when you think about like, this notion of seeing something, saying something, or just getting an inkling, because sometimes people will say to me, "Well, I didn't think it was worthy of that." What do you think? What do you say to that when someone says, "What I thought didn't seem worthy enough for me to call"?
I'd say do the SAR, right? If nothing comes of it, nothing comes of it, right? And I when I train about like suspicious activity reporting, I go, I don't care about their gender, I don't care about their race, I don't care about anything of how they look like per se. Their description is incidental to that person, right? Whether they're a white male adult, black male adult, whatever the case may be, male, female, or whatever the case may be. But look at the behavior. What is it about behavior caught your attention? And even if you don't think it's SAR worthy, do the SAR. Nobody from the fusion center is going to say, "Oh, you shouldn't have done the SAR." There just may not be nothing that comes of it, um, as opposed to missing something that could have been a small piece of the puzzle for within the bigger, we'll say, landscape of threat mitigation and threat intervention. So I say
You and
do
I
the
both
SAR.
you and I both agree because, and certainly, I won't put myself anywhere in the same level of knowledge as you, but I know enough to be almost dangerous in that regard. Uh, I've come to realize, and certainly in my understanding, and that one of the biggest factors in what will ultimately become some level of violent attack or event is that this notion of leakage occurs. Pre-threat leakage, these behaviors, these indicators that we talk about. Tell me where leakage is such a vital part of our ability to possibly thwart, prevent something.
Without naming specific cases, and these are cases I'll mention when I do the threat liaison officer program, and then to a certain extent for the infrastructure liaison officer program. When we talk about leakage, when we talk about like online leakage, where you have an individual that starts to radicalize in whatever ideology, I don't care what the ideology is, they're leakage to the family, like you know where, and I'm just making stuff up here, where, I hate the government, or I hate this certain set of people. We should do something about it. And they don't hide their feelings, right? And so they go through a radicalization process, and either family or friends on their social media account, or maybe in a chat room, start to see that. And so it's either verbally or electronically expressed. So you have that leakage. There's that one case recently back east where an individual, and I'll say this, it doesn't always have to be political ideology. It just could be just hate, of whatever the hate may be, where this one person talked about going to an airport to shoot it up. He expressed it that morning. He sent it out to family. He drives to the airport, and he's got a long gun laying in plain view, um, in his truck. And in the interim, in real time, his family sees that as this person is driving to the airport. They call law enforcement, and he's headed toward this airport, and he's, stopped at the airport, and, initially, "Hey, why are you here?" "Oh, I'm just hanging out. Why are you bothering me?" And then, unfortunately for us, when I say law enforcement, his truck was illegally parked. Law enforcement get there. There's a long gun. that's lying in plain view, loaded, ready to go, and future or further investigations revealed he was going to walk into the airport, never been there, get a basic landscape of the layout, then walk back to his truck and do an active shooter event, right? And so that was stopped. And I'll say this more importantly, Sal, our shooter in Chico did exactly that. Didn't park his car with the shotgun in the vehicle, gets out, walks through, does a quick reconnaissance, comes back out to his car, grabs a shotgun, and then does what he does. Um, and so my first one didn't have leakage, but I'm just talking about tradecraft with our bad guys are doing. So that's the leakage you have. Like see something, say something, or hear something, say something.
Yeah, I mean it. Again, if I'm correct, in many of these cases, about 98% of the time, there's some form of leakage that occurs that people have heard that someone is. The problem is that you know everyone gets pissed off and says something, and the next thing you know, I mean, especially in these polarizing times, um, someone's gonna say something. I'm gonna go and kill those fucking people. We're gonna do something. I'm gonna kill him or her. You know, a lot of stuff is said, and then you have to just say, "Well, God, is he or she just blowing off steam? They're full of it. They're not going to do anything like that." Or are they? And so is it really for you to determine, whether they are or aren't, when you could anonymously submit information to try to run that to ground and avoid the next major, mass casualty event.
And within the SAR system, you can anonymously report, and some people have seen this. Well, that could be used for, various purposes as far as either, uh, a hoax call or things like that. But I'll say the fusion centers have really become, I'll use a colloquial word, game tight and vetting what SARs we're going to look at. And then within the fusion center side, there's tools that are available to the analysts to take a deeper dive into social media and to other aspects of the internet or the dark web to see, okay, is this person just venting, just like you said, or what? There's things that are being done in on the dark web regarding this individual that they consider private or you know uh, not open to the public. And so all these things happening in the background regarding attack planning and, without getting political, talking about the UFC event at the White House recently, and then that attack, coming to the alert of law enforcement because mom has a son who she says, hey, he's being manipulated or radicalized, and this individual's buying weapons, ammo, armor, ballistic protection, and then all this plan comes to fruition. And then, this investigation, then we have this investigation.
And they
But
were
you're
able
right.
to thwart a major potential mass casualty event, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I think I've heard it said once, there's no SAR too small. You know, um, the one that you think that probably doesn't have any credence to it is the one you need to, the one that you obviously know, is like, oh yeah, from a mile away, this person is going to do something terrible. That's an easy one. It's the ones that are kind of wobblers, as we would normally
Mhm.
say. That shouldn't be your decision. Kick the can down the road, pass the buck, and let someone else make that decision. You would feel terrible if what you thought might be, you never reported, and it actually happened. You don't want to be the person who said, "I kind of thought that something terrible was going to happen. I kind of thought that they were going to do something," because I could see it in the things that they said or things that they posted, or just the chatter online. It's certainly become an important component because, would you agree, Carlos, that The United States is the clearinghouse and the originator of active shooter and targeted violence, and that we are almost exporting it abroad.
I would say unfortunately so, Sal. I mean, just and, here, I'm gonna share bias with whoever's gonna look at this later on. Like, I love America. I know it's not a perfect country. We've had a violent, uh, you know, development as a country, but I also appreciate the Bill of Rights that we have. And so we have a gun culture, both positive and negative, but, yes, the development of the active shooter here, and then being exported or that behavior being exported to other countries on different ideology, whether it's based on hate of race, gender, religion, or just a fascination with our Columbine shooters. Um, so we do have that.
Which kind of, differentiates, and not that it makes any difference when you're in that room or in that building or in that outdoor event. When you're at an outdoor concert in Vegas and all of a sudden shots are being fired from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay, um, it doesn't really matter what the origin, whether it's a terrorist act or an act of violence, a random act of violence, you're still, a victim or a participant, willing or unwilling at that event. Um, it becomes readily apparent that, there are things that are happening in this country that are starting to become more alarming, but we also have a greater awareness of how to prevent it, and each of us has kind of a responsibility to try to do something about it.
I agree with that. Being that we're all interconnected, as a species and looking out for the welfare of others and looking at impact of quality of life. I have this background that I have. I try for me and speaking for myself, right? Trying to see the good in others, but then also recognizing there are people that just want to do us ill, regardless of their background.
And, I agree with you 100%. And you, my friend, are kind of a tip of the spear in like spreading the word and teaching people in everything that you do with the Fusion Center. Um, and then even at a academic level, tell me a little bit about your academic life and things that the instruction that you provide at the college level.
So, uh, 2005, uh, I did some teaching at Sacramento City College off and on with, in conjunction with my schedule with the sheriff's department because I was teaching and then retired in 2014, still continued to teach at Sacramento City College and then stopped there. And then in 2019, got hired to teach at California State University of Sacramento within the criminal justice department. So working as part-time faculty, I'll teach mostly some lower division, and then last 3 years I've been teaching also an upper division violence and terrorism class there. And so being part of that, Sac State has a great and robust CJ program. It's a good institution, very diverse, very fun place to teach. And it's very rewarding to, again, I'll say this too. Not everybody in my class is a CJ major. And for me, and I'll say to my classes, I've lectured in overseas and um, I welcome different points of view. I fear not accountability or transparency. And, it makes for a really robust classroom environment.
That's great because you're whether someone is going to get actively involved in law enforcement or I think just having access to this type of education is good because it kind of gives you knowledge, and knowledge is power in many ways. You have also instructed not so much in a classroom setting, but maybe possibly you have with an international group. Can you tell me a little bit about IMTT?
Yeah. So International Mobile Training Team, they've been around a long time. The boss, Monty's a good man, a lot of real world experience, and then I'll stop there with that. But 17, 18, and 19, I got to go with that company to Finland and Estonia for tactical training, and then some. They have their terrorism experts there, but 17 and 19, I did a terrorism seminar lecture, titled, Terrorism Through an American Paradigm. But the training we provided over there were like long gun instructor development, low light, no light instructor development, nods training, uh, static and dynamic entry training, hostage rescue with a known or unknown location, some breacher training as far as, you know, mechanical. And then they had their own breacher for, uh, you know, explosive breaching. So that was very rewarding as well.
You everything that you're mentioning, Carlos, um, is like is what excites me in terms of the type of training that you have been involved in, and full disclosure, you have worked with and for me at the International School of Tactical Medicine. The philosophy from day one continues today, and even more so. When I took the helm of ISTM, I really felt like scenario based training was fundamental and essential, um, and integral in across the board, whether it be in law enforcement or fire, EMS, and down to civilian training, where we provide civilian courses in active shooter response and stop the bleed, etc. Um, how important, and I'm sure I'm just preaching to the choir here. Do you feel it is for agencies, personnel to engage in not just training? Because I don't want to say that not all training is good training. I want to say all training is good training, but how important is it to get involved in more specific training that it will give you basically physical skills and through rote memorization of tactical skills, etc., medical skills. How important do you think that is in today's training environment?
Without just saying yes, right? But then I'll talk about things you learn in the Marine Corps leadership by example. So right, I retired in 2014, but 7, 18, 19, I got to do that stuff with IMTT, but I've continued my own path of training. Like I said, okay, still have a badge and a gun. Okay, I don't do enforcement work. It's just a different application of work and things of that nature. But putting myself through training. So if you're going to be,
Tell me about the FLETC tactical medicine instructor course you took. And I
oh,
remember you
that,
were telling me that there was one exercise where you tourniquet application and working with tourniquets
oh,
applied. Tell me about that.
there's one. Well, I think that was from 9/11 tactical, but I'll talk about FLETC first. So FLETC is a federal law enforcement training center, but they have traveling teams. So I went to a FLETC train the trainer tactical medical instructor course, what was a pretty awesome course. I'd recommend people going there. One, it's free, right? I mean, to go there, you'd have to cover per diem and travel and things of that nature. But we started doing teach backs before the end of the first day. And then you had wet and dry labs and just a lot of hands on. And so, talking, and it's all wound packing, chest seal, different types of tourniquets, improvised tourniquets, improvised chest seals, um, extraction, things of that nature. And for me, it's one thing if I put on training and I'm running the scenario and that's fine, but it's different because I like to challenge myself where putting myself through training. So we had this training, and then beginning the second day, we started live scenarios, right? Just like in the academy, right? You've got your blue gun, you've got your Sam Brown, right? You've got the first aid kit that they give you, and they'll say, "Hey, Lois, out that door, right to the hard left is where your scenario begins." But there could be threats everywhere. So that was an awesome experience. And just, I'd recommend, even if people were not going to be TAC med instructors, that would be a good course to go to. And it's easy for me to say that if I was a, you know, division commander in patrol, or Watts commander, or sergeant, I develop a document saying, "Hey, this is why this is important." There's all kinds of stuff to generate for the justification for going, and it's just a great school. And then they have different types of FLETC training, but this was in out of Texas. Uh, but I did go through the for 9/11 tactical out of Burnett, Texas, for the TCC, TCCC. That was a 64-hour program, just like being back in the military, a great program. And then the scenarios became harder as we progressed, going from IO to IV application, and different things. And at one point, uh, on the X, returning fire, um, putting on a tourniquet, it's not working. Putting on another tourniquet, it's not working, and turn it into this, wet lab, and then just trying to figure it out. So it was very challenging. And then people presenting with multiple, issues, right? Tourniquet, needle D, um, uh, you know, different things of that nature. So that was good.
Yeah. I'll tell you, like you said, there's a lot of training available out there. Some of it is absolutely free, especially if you can find it regionally close to you. If you're in law enforcement or fire EMS, a lot of it is funded by, the federal government through local UASIs, which stands for the Urban Authorities Security Initiative. Their main focus is providing training and materials for working toward anti-terrorist activities. And so, certainly, if you are, in law enforcement, EMS, et cetera, it's certainly important for you to um, avail yourself to that type of training. You've had quite a career that's still, I'm not saying that your career is over, but you certainly, you're one of those guys who I think, from the first day that I met you, uh, somehow you seem to find the 25th hour of a 24-hour day. Um, what does Carlos do on his off time? Does he do anything, or is he just a 24-hour learner, educator?
No, even with well, I say to my students, right? Yeah, I've done some things, I haven't done everything. I know some things, but I don't know everything. And the truly educated never stop learning. But I enjoy, the outdoors, like mountain biking, weight training. Um, there's my house chores and stuff like that. You know, I still got to pay bills. I got to mow the lawn, uh, clean house.
You know, when you when you measure that against everything else that you've done and are currently doing, that almost seems boring. But I understand that it's stuff that you've got to do. I'm with you. I had to take care of lawn work and a few chores. Just yesterday. And of course, I don't have anywhere near the activity in my day as you do. But yeah, you got to take time. In fact, I just got done having. I'm almost embarrassed to say it. Um, um, I played pickleball with a former fellow highway patrolman who's a SWAT guy who, super active. He's a big mountain biker, and I mean, I was much better than him, but he had the stamina and the aerobic fitness to be out there all day long. And but the point of it is that you've got to find um, things to do that divert you from that. And so I'm glad to hear that you're doing that. As we reach the end of this episode, Carlos, have you got any closing thoughts? In fact, what I'd like to ask you is, hey, listen, if you were going to give some advice to a young man or a woman who just left high school, maybe just exited out of the Marine Corps or the other military branch, and was interested in getting into law enforcement, what would you tell them?
Well, that it I would research the organization that they wanted to go into, right? The availability of information online to prepare for that interview, to do mock interviews, and to like we're all human, so sometimes you'll miss the mark providing a service during the call, um, but to you know, and it's easy for me to say this because it wasn't always easy to look at life and try to appreciate it. But to, like, prepare yourself, put yourself in a place again, with me, it was time and chance, but having, success, building success, and so the thing is, right, you get into the organization, you graduate from the academy, and for some people, it may be the best time of your life because you're in the best shape, right? You're in the best shooting because this is, the shooting that you've done. You haven't done any shooting before. You're well disciplined, and then those things kind of ebb away once you like get into your assignment. And so the thing I would say this because I'm a big believer of this, right? Because I would say once you graduate, put yourself through training, if even once a year, even if it's on your own time and your own dime, whether it's tactical training, first aid, or some type of officer safety training outside the curriculum of what the department provides. So then you start widening, and I use this word a lot, widening your aperture of the landscape to see what's out there, right? Not to see just what your department's doing or what the norm is within your AOR, but outside. So training. And then that when you go to those training, like 2 years ago, and I can't remember the name of it's from a university back east, and they're part of this big collaboration of all kinds of law enforcement training, and it was also free. And I put myself through, or I attended. I paid for my own mileage and per diem, but I went through as a student a 3-day active shooter course just to see what type of bad habits I'd picked up. Because it's one thing, when I was on SWAT and training all the time, and yeah, good tactics, good shooting, but all the things are perishable. So to maintain that training, obviously not burn out because like you don't pick the day picks you. And so and when you go to that training, engage in it. You don't rise to that level of training that you have attended. You rise to that level of training that you've engaged in because there is no perfect formula. And I've seen it. I've seen it as a student and I've seen it as an instructor where you have people come in and they'll just do one rep and there's multiple opportunities to do reps, whether it's to multiple entries, a chance to act as the, detail leader or a chance to do another, um, shooting, training drill again, and they'll just do it once. And I'm not villainizing them. That's fine to do, but it's you if people have this attitude, "Hey, I'm gonna do it the way I'm gonna do it now," and then on the day in question, and you don't know that day, I'll do it the right way. It just doesn't work out that way.
Yeah. Well,
And
nothing
it's
is ever going to be perfect. No, I mean, if you are just a factor in something that's going to occur and not the only factor, then you should expect that things will go wrong.
right,
And,
and
you know,
uh,
and that's, and so being prepared
mhm,
for, for every other factor that may be involved is part of your planning, right?
yeah. It is.
Yeah.
You hear that adage, "No tactical plan ever survived the first shot,"
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
because you can't control everything, and even on the entries that we had that nobody got hurt and, force was used, there were I'm not saying there were contingencies that were accounted for that allowed us to have that successful, resolution.
Yeah. No, no, I understand what you're saying. You know, it's a mindset that's developed over time though. And so, as we kind of wrap this thing up, here's my observations of you, Carlos, if you don't mind me saying. You're a
Alright.
guy who has humble beginnings. Kind of, I mean, almost, yeah, I'll just say in many ways, you and I have traveled down some of the same roads. Hell, we both come from a family of 7 siblings. Um, but here's where you and I kind of part part roads here. We go in different directions. And I'm not saying that I've been a slouch and done nothing, but you have set yourself on a course to be self motivated, self educated, a learner, a thinker, and an educator, and have put yourself in positions to continue to grow um, beyond your career in law enforcement, and to the point where again you are passing on what and the knowledge that you have acquired over several decades of really great work, um, to other people. And it's a credit to yourself, it's a credit to your family, it's a credit to the agencies you work with, and again, very much a credit to you and in who you are. And so I just want to say thank you so much for being on our show today. It really speaks to the essence of what this program is about in the lives of the people who've been involved in law enforcement and the military, because you've served not only your country, but you've also served the people of California and the county of Sacramento, um, to a very large degree, and continue to serve. And so I want to say thank you for joining us. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, so I appreciate your kind words. Just you tell people. I tell people who, like, when I've gone to training as a student or start a new assignment, um, you have to learn to step down to step up, right? To recognize your role within the team and to um, respect the knowledge that other people bring to the team environment.
Yeah, and that's an excellent way to close this, because it's kind of all encompassing, and certainly is a great way to say, for me to say thank you for being with us today, and I appreciate it, and I hope we have another opportunity. I know you and I are going to continue to train together, but I hope we have another opportunity to speak together in a format like this, and when you've got new and more exciting stories to talk about, and the new horizons, which I think you're just going to continue to grow. So, you know, n- at some point, I'm sure we'll be calling you Dr. Ponce. And once you decide to educate yourself even further, again, my friend, thank you so much for joining us on Life on the X, and to our listeners, we appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again. Until the next time, stay safe.